Good evening and good afternoon on the West Coast. I'm attorney Alma Rosa Nieto, immigration attorney with 30 years experience for those that are new, explaining hopefully the new laws, answering questions, queries, maybe even giving you second opinions if you've already had immigration advice and you want to kind of double check with someone that has experience. I'd be happy to take your questions. So please start writing them now. I'm going to touch on a couple topics to start and then we'll go right into Q&A. So let's take advantage of the time we have and answer. I remind you that we have a Spanish version, Sí en Español, every Thursday, identical to this, but it's on Thursdays, same site, different time. 7 p.m. West Coast time, 10 p.m. East Coast time. So English on Tuesdays, Thursdays is in Spanish. So look forward to hearing from people that are watching in English, can switch over to Spanish and ask questions and maybe have 2 opportunities to get in. Also, please share this information with friends, co-workers, family that may need immigration advice, or you just want to keep up to date with what's happening in immigration. I'm also on the executive board for AILA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, based in Washington, D.C., and I'm in their media. I'm a media liaison and on their committee, and that allows me to get information at the hour, at the minute, on the latest, as well as obviously through news sources. So I try to, Tuesdays and Thursdays, give you the latest of what's happened in the last few days, so you're up to date and you can share this information and hopefully use it to your advantage. And if it's negative news, know how to protect against the negative news. Let's get started. I'm going to start with the first topic. Some of you that travel nationally, I'm not talking about internationally. Maybe you live in New York and you travel to Chicago, or you live in Miami and you come to the West Coast to Los Angeles, or vice versa. And you've always used your ID, your driver's license, for your TSA check-ins at the airport. And it's been fine up to now. Well, there's a new rule in town, and I don't know if you can see it, but these billboards are prominently placed at the entrance of TSA as you're checking in. And it's not really good news. It says that starting January 22nd, 2018, so next year, the beginning of the year, you'll need an alternative ID to fly if you have a driver's license or an ID issued by any of the following states. Luckily, it's just 5 states, but who knows if they'll expand it later. So please take note, or tell your family that lives in those states that if they don't have a green card, they're not U.S. citizens, and they're here undocumented, and they've traveled back and forth for work or to see family or for pleasure, and they've been able to use their ID from these states, it's no longer going to be the case as of January 2018. The 5 states are Maine, Minnesota, Missouri, Montana, and Washington State on the West Coast. Not Washington, D.C., Washington State. So these are new procedures that are taking effect by TSA, and of course it'll affect people that don't have a green card and are traveling, that are in the country undocumented. So my recommendation is, if you can go to your consulate and they'll issue some kind of ID along with the ID from either Washington, Montana, Missouri, Minnesota, and Maine. Seems like 4 states that start with the letter M, then Washington State. It'd be best to have another form of ID, either a passport issued from the consulate from your home country, plus this ID. This way you can travel. TSA is not going to inquire into your immigration status. However, they will not let you board the plane for lack of proper identification if you belong to one of these 5 states. We suspect that it's because these states are states that issued driver's license to undocumented people in the past, and many people from other states, maybe neighboring states or maybe a close by state that didn't have the driver's license, have gone into these 5 states claiming they live there to get a driver's license and then be able to drive and even travel with TSA. So because these are the states that have given driver's license, perhaps those are why they targeted these 5 states. I wouldn't be surprised if it expands, but be ready. Don't wait till the last minute. You never know when you have to travel for emergency reasons or work reasons within the 50 United States, and you want to be ready to do that and not procure a passport or another type of ID at the last minute. So very important news, and please share it. Another piece of good news and bad news. You know, I always say things always have 2 sides, or the coin has 2 sides. the Haitian TPS, it's called Temporary Protected Status. It's a status that allows people to live in this country, work here, and be able to get a work permit because their countries are in turmoil, either by an act of God, like in Central America, Hurricane Mitch, or other issues, political strife, but it has to involve a huge amount of people. And the people that are here from those countries illegally will get this temporary reprieve from deportation. So right now, the TPS for Haiti was very threatened, and they were thinking that they were going to shut it down. Well, recently we just heard that it's going to be extended for another 6 months, so till the end of the year. Of course, the bad side of that was that it's been extended for 18 months in the past, and the same for Salvadorians and Nicaraguans and Hondurans. And so we're hoping that, one, this doesn't spread, this idea of canceling TPS or shortening it to other countries that have TPS. And we're hoping that for Haitians it could be extended for another year after it expires in this beginning of next year, 2018. So that's the news. I'll have some other news to share in a minute, but we'd like to start with the questions if we're ready.
Yes, the first question is from Isa Medrano. I'm 29 and my biological father is a U.S. citizen. He wants to petition for me, but he's not on my birth certificate. If I'm in the U.S. and can't go to Mexico and get that fixed, what should I do?
Okay, I'm very sorry, Fernie, but you're going to have to repeat the first part because we were having bad audio and I could hardly understand.
The question is, there's a 29-year-old who has a biological father who is a U.S. citizen. He wants to petition for her, but he's not on her birth certificate, and she would like to know if she's in the U.S. and not in Mexico, what would she have to do to get that fixed?
That is so easy. One, the Mexican consulates now, I would say about a year ago, have now a new procedure in place to allow people that are in the United States and can't go back to Mexico to either get divorce documents, birth records, death certificates, or corrections on a birth certificate or on other documents that are of importance, that you can work through the Mexican consulate within the United States. They'll be the liaison and connect you with the Mexican authorities and help you do change processes. So I would start there. Second, the other idea or recommendation, and I've used this a lot, is a DNA test. You can get a test from your biological father and you, and it'll prove 99.9% that he is your father, and you can file paperwork with that, even though he doesn't appear in your birth certificate. So never stop a process because you want to immigrate through maybe a sibling, and one sibling has one name on the birth certificate for parents and the other sibling has another name. DNA test can correct that and show that you're siblings or brother and sister. Same thing with father and child. So very important to know that you shouldn't stall in filing an immigration application because there's a lack of a name on a birth certificate. Either it can be amended or a DNA test will correct that issue.
Mercedes Bonilla. My husband is in jail with a second degree and an ICE hold. Is it possible to drop off the charges and to be released? My little one has a type of autism. Can that help him?
Well, every state, again, I've said immigration law is federal and it's the same in all 50 states in the United States. However, criminal law is different in every single state. In other words, we have 50 books on criminal law. So you'd have to go to a criminal lawyer in your state to see if, one, you can do post-conviction relief. That means that after the judge rendered a sentence, you can still go back and try to eliminate the conviction, vacate it if they find that there were issues of due process, lack of evidence presented, any kind of prejudice, not proper advisements. The police didn't give advisements, your attorney didn't give advisements. So there's many times that something can be done after the fact, after someone's serving time, or it can be reduced and modified. So very important to go to a lawyer in your state, a criminal lawyer, not an immigration lawyer, to see what can be done to somehow minimize or drop the charges down to something that would be, one, less time served in prison, and two, hopefully not make him deportable, and three, allow him to immigrate in the future.
Victor Giron. I came to the U.S. in 2005 and I'm going to marry a U.S. citizen. I came by the border. Do you think I have a chance to fix my situation? I have two kids, an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old.
Excellent. You say you came by the border. Again, I've been doing this for a long time, many decades. Many of my clients have come in through the border, but they kind of slip along the border. They're in a car and they've never questioned. They're hiding in the back seat. So coming through the border doesn't quite tell me everything. However, if you came in through the border and you were inspected, you turned documents in of some sort, a visa, a permit, and they allowed you to come in, then of course you can immigrate through your wife, and you can do it in a quick manner and all within the United States. It takes about 6 months nationwide, and it's called an adjustment of status process. Now let's flip this scenario. Let's say you came through the border, but you came through the side and you weren't seen and you got in. That would be an entry without inspection, and you could still immigrate through your spouse who's a U.S. citizen, no problem with that. However, you can't immigrate in the U.S. You have to go back home to your country, to the American embassy, and get an interview. The process takes about 1 year to 2 because you're going to need a waiver because you've been living here illegally, and that's a pardon to forgive the illegal presence that you have here. So the case is much more complicated. It takes longer. It costs a lot of money, and there's always a risk because you're going out, and you never know if you can come back in.
Francisco Fernandez, why is the I-130 taking a long time?
Good question. Last week, I believe we addressed it in English. I get confused sometimes because we do this in Spanish too on Thursdays. But last week, we touched on the fact that there are severe delays at USCIS. Remember, the Department of Homeland Security is the umbrella. Under it is ICE. Under it is USCIS. And USCIS is the immigration part that grants benefits. So where you can file applications and get a relief of some sort of work permit or a green card. They're very backlogged with citizenship and other applications. So I believe that since the new administration, actually since the new president won, so as of November 6th, people have just been filing applications left and right, whether they are to become a citizen or to finally get a green card. And maybe people were sitting on their rights, or they didn't know they qualified. They sought counsel and found out that they do have a case, so they're filing. So I think that what happens is that the process is the same. However, the personnel is the same as well, but the inflow of applications has grown, and that's why it's taking a little bit longer.
Alma Cortez, my husband and I have been here for more than 20 years. I qualified for Daca and he didn't. We have a special need child that will always depend on us. People have mentioned we could possibly get status. We are both from Mexico, and I would like to know, how true is that?
So you have Daca, your husband doesn't, and you have a child that is what, Fernie? Again, I lost you. I can't hear you. I'm sorry for those that are listening to us, but I think that as a child that was born in the U.S. and has some issues?
Yeah. Yes, correct.
Okay. So, okay. Daca is temporary. We don't know when it's going to end. For those of you new to this channel and are wondering what's Daca, Daca is a program, deferred action, that President Obama issued for young dreamers that have been here since they were children. It gives them a work permit every 2 years, but it will not turn in, it's not amnesty, it will not turn into a green card. So the wife has that. The husband did not qualify or didn't apply, and they have a child that's born here with some issues. Very important to understand that many people are advertising. Unfortunately, when laws change, you're going to have good people advising people on how to do things correctly, and then you're going to have what I call sharks, whether they be lawyers or notary publics or paralegals or people that do income taxes, and they're going to prey on the immigrant community. And what they're saying, and they're advertising heavily in the last few months, is if you've been here 10 years, you have a child born in the U.S., and one of your children has some kind of medical issues, you can get a green card. What they're not telling you, and I'm going to share with you, is the percentage of cases approved nationwide. Hold on to your seat because it's very dramatic, it's sad. 1 to 2% of cases get approved. So out of 100 cases that people turn themselves into immigration to try to get the defense, well, first appear before an immigration judge and in trial submit a defense called cancellation of removal because they have a child that has some kind of medical issues. or mental issues, and they've been here for a long time and the child was born in the U.S., the judge only grants 1 to 2 cases out of 100. So be very careful with that. That's something that I would get the advice, I've been saying get 2 opinions, I would get 3. 1, it's costly. 2, you're turning yourself into immigration. 3, the percentages are very low. And 4, if the judge says you're denied, you can appeal it, but then eventually you'll have to leave the United States and you may be forced to leave. So be very careful with that. People say it very freely. Oh, you've got a child that's born here and she has cerebral palsy or mental retardation or some kind of deformity. Oh yeah, it's easy, go and apply. No, it is not. So very important, and I'm so glad you're tuning in here because I will always try to give you both sides.
Araceli Cerda. My husband has a resident card. He does have a history of DUI tickets, and I would like to know if he runs a risk to get deported.
Under this new administration, I want to tell everybody that has a green card or is here unauthorized that everyone has a risk, because obviously this administration is on a hunt to deport undocumented people even if they have absolutely no crimes. Now, a resident, of course, has more protection. A resident has a green card. However, my concern is if you want to become a citizen, that could prejudice you. It depends on when they occurred. It depends on the gravity of the offense. Did you hit someone? Did you hit and run? Did you hit a public service post of some sort, a light post, and those cost thousands of dollars? So the gravity of the DUI has a lot to do with my recommendation. I would get all of the DUIs, go to court, get the docket sheets. That means the resume of the crime in court, that what the judge sentenced, and the penal codes under which you were charged and convicted, who your defense attorney was, who the prosecutor was, who the judge was, who the interpreter was. So it's a pretty good resume for a criminal lawyer to have and look at and tell you if some of those can be eliminated from your record. Again, in some states you can do that. I like people that are here, even with a green card, to be as clean as possible, and 2, have a clean record so that eventually they can become U.S. citizens.
David de la Rosa. Can I leave the country while my application is in process?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I don't know what kind of application you have filed. I don't know what status you came in with and what status you have in the interim of when you arrived and when you filed. I'll give you a brief general answer. If it's an application to get a green card, because you can also have an application for citizenship, I'll answer that first. If you are a resident and you're applying for citizenship, of course you can travel. My only concern is that they may send you a notice to appear before the Immigration Service or for fingerprints, or you're swearing in and you're abroad. Well, your family has to call you and tell you got the notice, you got to come back. Now, if you have, you're applying for a green card, if you came in illegally and it's a consular case, of course don't leave, because if you leave, you're going to have to stay outside the country until you have your final interview, and that could be a year or 2. If you're applying through a citizen in the United States and you came in legally, in some cases, yes, you can travel. If you've never had illegal presence, in other words, you came in on a certain type of visa, before it expired, your spouse, that's a U.S. citizen, applied for you, so there's no, think of like chain links. There's no break in those links. You are always legal in the country. Then you can apply for an advance parole to travel outside of the United States and re-enter. Again, I don't know your exact circumstances. This is general information. I recommend, if you have a lawyer, that you ask that question. And if you don't, seek an opinion from a lawyer to advise you, knowing exactly what kind of application and what your history is.
Sammy Jimenez. My husband got his work authorization card back in February. Do you know how much longer he needs to wait until he has his appointment with immigration to receive his green card?
I assume that it's an adjustment of status, that you're a citizen and you're applying for your husband, and your husband got a work permit in the interim of getting a green card. Usually that process takes about 6 months nationwide. You file your application, let me give you like dates today. Within about 3 months, you'd have your fingerprint appointment. No, maybe 2 months, and then 3 months a work permit, and 5 to 6 months later is the final interview where the 2 spouses go to immigration and they interview you to see if it's a valid marriage, and everything else checks, and they say approved, you're granted, you have a green card.
Reina Gomez. How long is the renewal process for Daca taking? I went for my fingerprints in March and haven't received anything yet.
May, and so only 2 months. It's taken about 6 months. I know that when we first started with Daca back in 2012-13, it was only taking 2 months, 3 months max. Now it's taking 6 months. Don't be disheartened. They haven't forgotten about you. That's how long it's taking.
Cesar Coronel. He would like to know if his wife, who is from Venezuela, can apply for any type of political asylum.
Okay, asylum has new rules. Asylum's been around for decades, and in the past, I know that I started working as a law clerk when I was in law school with a lot of the Central American community when I was in school in San Francisco, and people could have arrived 5 years before and apply for asylum. Now, because of conditions in the country, now there's a new rule that says that from the date you arrive in the United States, you have 1 year to file for asylum. There's some exceptions to that, and you have to show exceptional circumstances of why you didn't apply, and sometimes they may let you apply late, sometimes not. So I'd have to know how long you've been here, and hopefully it's before a year. And be careful, because asylum is also very difficult to win. And first it starts with, remember that umbrella, Department of Homeland Security, USCIS is one of the branches. That's where it's filed, the asylum application. So you get 2 shots at asylum. One with the Immigration Service. If they deny you, then you get another shot. You go to court to see an immigration judge for a deportation hearing, now called removal hearings, and you get to present your asylum application again for a second time. But if you're denied, you've pretty much turned yourself in and you have to go home. So again, advice from several sources to make sure you have a strong case before turning yourself in.
George Sancho. When can you get a work permit when you're waiting for the visa U?
For a U visa, roughly, U visas, I remind you, and some people again are just tuning in and don't know a lot of this lingo, or maybe you're children of people or parents that are undocumented and you want to learn how to help your parents and you're like, what's a U visa? A U visa is for victims of violent crimes. This is a congressional act, and people can actually get a green card if they're a victim of a violent crime and they've cooperated with the police and the authorities to assist in the prosecution of the abuser. You don't always have to go to court. I've won many U visa cases where somebody was a victim of a violent crime and they never got the abuser, and the person can still get a green card. But it's only 10,000 visas a year, and now there are like 35,000 people in line. So when you file, you know you have to wait for the next 10,000 to be approved, then the next 10,000 the following year, and then the third year. So right now it's taking 3 to 3.5 years to be approved on a U visa, and a work permit is right kind of in the middle when you can get one.
Carlos Orduño. I got married, came to the visa interview in Juarez. However, the clinic gave me a hard time because I said that I smoked marijuana in the past. The visa center told me I had to redo the pardon. I did, and now I'm waiting. I've been in Mexico for a year. What can I expect next?
Again, some of these cases really upset me and really affect me because this can be prevented. When a person is going to their interview abroad, whether it's Mexico, Central America, South America, Europe, wherever, because now we're in the English version, this could be all over the world that you're going for an interview to get a green card, depending on the country of origin of the applicant. A lawyer has to prepare you. We prepare our clients an hour, maybe 2 sometimes, and we go over all the questions that are on the applications. We go over all the questions that potentially could be asked by the U.S. consulate. Of course, we don't know all of them because we're not in their head, but so many years of experience, we know what is asked routinely. And in your particular case, we know what might be a trigger, and we tell you how to prepare for that. Unfortunately, a lot of people go to notaries or people that just fill out forms, and they're not prepared. They go to the interview, they don't know that they have an interview with a doctor who may ask them about their vices, whether it be alcohol or drugs. And if the person there voluntarily says, well, yeah, I smoked pot, 5 years ago, I stopped, you're admitting to use of drugs, and that could be a factor of inadmissibility. Or you have multiple DUIs, you're saying you have an alcohol problem. So it's very important to be prepared before by your lawyer, and if you don't have one, get one before you leave the country. And be prepared in your particular facts to know how to answer the questions to best serve you, and not lying, but obviously to enhance your possibilities of getting approved and not denied. Now, once you're denied, like in this case, because they found a factor of ineligibility, just because you're married to a citizen and they invite you to the interview, it's not to say, here's your green card. You're going for an interview to see if you are eligible and you meet all the requirements under the law and you're not excludable. So you're basically going to hope that everything turns out well. So you better be well advised before you go out. In this case, you're filing for a waiver. Waivers can take anywhere from 3 months, I've seen, quickly, and some take a year, and some I've seen take up to 2 years. You can do inquiries and check with the embassy to see what the status is.
All right, and this is the last question from Gabriela Romero. I'm 18 and I live with my family. I have a boyfriend who's a resident and I'm planning to start my new life with him. My concern is that my family and our legal immigration process was through a political asylum. Now, my parents want to leave the country and I want to stay. What would happen to me with the asylum process if I stay here?
Okay, well, you don't tell me what happened with your asylum, if it's already been concluded for your parents or it's still pending, but there are 2 ways of filing asylum. You say you're 18, so you're an adult. It could have been filed as a derivative, meaning your parents filed and they added your names and you're a derivative. You're like a secondary in the same application as your parents. If they cancel it and leave, of course you have nothing. Now, if you filed an application on your own, well, you can continue it. However, in this case, if you're going to marry a lawful permanent resident, the first question I would ask is, how long has he been a green card holder? And let's make him a citizen so he could immigrate you quickly, because a green card holder can immigrate his wife, but it takes longer, like double, so about 3 years, a lot more than if he was a citizen. So I need to know a lot more information. Don't cancel anything. Don't go seek counsel with an immigration lawyer after your parents leave. Do it right now so that as a family you can get counsel and they know how best to continue the application or to close it out without prejudicing you.
Martin Velasquez would like to know, why is it easier for someone that is in immigration jail to get a green card than a person that hasn't done anything wrong?
Okay. Because they've turned themselves in to the immigration service. Somebody that's here undocumented is pretty much a shadow. I call it bajo el agua, under the water, right? With a little straw to breathe. And so immigration doesn't know you're here. So if you want to file for some kind of relief, it's harder because you can't present yourself with an immigration judge, like in the case I said earlier, cancellation of removal. But somebody that's been detained, say for a traffic violation, and then is turned over to ICE, they've pretty much hopped from the criminal case to go see an immigration judge for a deportation hearing, and there he or she can pursue some kind of remedy. Now, if they've had serious crimes, they're not going to win anything, even though they were in detention and then they went to see the judge. But it's kind of, I like to say it's kind of an avenue to get in to see a judge and then present a case for relief, versus before you couldn't because you're, again, in the shadows. So that's a basic answer. For immigration law is very complex, and I'm trying to chunk it down for you and understand also with the little information you give me. So that was our last question, but I want to remind those that just tuned in, we have on Thursdays this same format, the same thing, but in Spanish, en español para nuestra comunidad, every Thursday, 7 o'clock West Coast time, 10 o'clock East Coast time. So if you were trying to understand this because you're desperate to get answers and didn't, and you want it in Spanish, tune in this Thursday, 7 p.m. West, 10 p.m. East Coast time. Please share this information, and don't forget to like my Facebook page. I'd appreciate that. Till next Thursday in Spanish and next Tuesday for those that speak English only. Bye.